Have you ever wondered if your dog could lead you to hidden treasures? This incredible story proves it's possible. Join us as a loyal dog, guided by an uncanny sense, guides his human on a journey through ancient ruins to uncover a long-lost secret. The late afternoon sun cast long, skeletal shadows across Jake's overgrown backyard, the kind that made familiar shapes seem alien and menacing. But it wasn't the shadows that held Max's attention. Max, a scruffy terrier mix with an intelligence that far outstripped his pedigree, was fixated on the far corner of the yard, where the crumbling foundation stones of an old, long-demolished outbuilding lay half-buried under a tangle of ivy and weeds. For the past week, Max had been acting strangely. It started subtly, a low growl directed at the ruins during their evening fetch, a prolonged sniff at the base of a particularly large, moss-covered stone. But his behavior had escalated. Now he spent hours at the spot, digging with a frantic energy that belied his usually laid-back demeanor. His paws, caked with damp earth, would fly, sending clods of dirt and small stones skittering across the grass. He'd pause, panting, then let out a series of sharp, insistent barks, not at anything visible, but the ground itself. His entire being was focused, an unwavering fixation on that particular patch of forgotten ruins. He'd whine, a high-pitched sound full of urgency, then resume his digging, his small body quivering with an unseen agitation. Jake, a historian by passion, if not profession, currently freelancing as a writer to make ends meet, watched from the porch, a lukewarm mug of coffee forgotten in his hand. Initially, he dismissed it as Max chasing a mole, or perhaps a particularly stubborn root. But the intensity, the sheer persistence, was unlike anything he'd seen from his companion. Max wasn't just digging. He was excavating, driven by a purpose Jake couldn't fathom. The barks weren't playful. They were demanding, almost pleading. As Jake watched Max scratch and whine, his gaze fixed on the cold, indifferent stones, a shiver traced its way down his spine despite the mild autumn air. It wasn't fear, not exactly. It was a sudden, undeniable surge of curiosity, a primal itch to understand what had so thoroughly captivated his loyal dog. An unknown energy seemed to emanate from that spot. Or perhaps it was Max's conviction that was so infectious. The old outbuilding had been there when Jake bought the house years ago, a dilapidated structure he'd eventually paid to have torn down, leaving only the stubborn foundations. He'd never given it much thought beyond its being an eyesore. But now, watching Max, it felt different. It was as if the dog, with his keener, more primal senses, was perceiving something Jake couldn't, a whisper from the past, an echo of forgotten lives, or perhaps, as a wild, improbable thought flickered through Jake's mind, something more tangible. Max wasn't just reacting to a scent. It felt deeper, as if he were tuned into an ancient energy, a resonant frequency emanating from beneath the earth, hinting at something lost, something valuable, hidden within the ruins. The next morning, armed with a sturdy shovel, a flashlight, and a sense of burgeoning adventure, Jake approached the ruins. Max, seeing the shovel, yelped with excitement, his tail thumping a rapid rhythm against the ground. "All right, boy," Jake said, ruffling Max's ears. "Let's see what's got you so worked up." The ruins were more a jumble of lichen-stained foundation stones and a depression in the earth where a cellar might once have been. Jake started clearing away the thick ivy and tenacious weeds that had reclaimed the area. Max, ever the eager assistant, pawed at the loosened soil, occasionally nudging Jake's hand with his wet nose as if to direct him. The air was cool and damp, carrying the scent of overturned earth and decaying leaves. Sunlight filtered feebly through the overgrown branches of an ancient oak that overshadowed the site, dappling the scene in shifting patterns of light and shadow. It was a testament to a forgotten era, a small, lost piece of local history that Jake had, until now, utterly ignored. As Jake dug, following Max's insistent focus, his shovel struck something hard that wasn't stone. Brushing away the soil, he uncovered a series of rotting wooden planks. With a grunt of effort, he pried them loose, revealing a dark, narrow opening. It was a root cellar, or perhaps something more. Max whined, peering into the blackness, then barked once, sharply, before looking up at Jake, his eyes bright with anticipation. "You first, brave one." Jake chuckled, but there was a tremor of excitement in his voice. Shining his flashlight into the void, Jake saw rough-hewn stone steps leading down. The air that wafted up was surprisingly cool and free of the musty smell he'd expected. It smelled old, but clean like undisturbed earth. As they ventured deeper, the narrow passage opened into a small, circular chamber, no bigger than a walk-in closet. It was clearly man-made, the stones expertly fitted. Another, even narrower passage, previously concealed by fallen debris, led off to one side. Each discovery, each hidden space, amplified the feeling that they were on the verge of something significant. Max stayed close, a furry shadow at Jake's heels. When Jake hesitated at the mouth of the narrower passage, a wave of claustrophobia washing over him, Max nudged his hand, then darted a few feet into the darkness, looking back as if to say, "It's okay, come on." Jake, drawing courage from his companion's fearlessness, took a deep breath and followed. Their shared trust was palpable. Max, guided by his inexplicable intuition, and Jake, relying on his dog's senses and his own growing excitement, navigated the cramped, unseen challenges of their impromptu expedition. Every so often, Jake would reach down and scratch Max behind the ears, a silent acknowledgement of their partnership. As they delved further, the narrow passage opened into a larger, surprisingly intact chamber. The beam of Jake's flashlight danced across the walls, and his breath caught in his throat. The chamber wasn't empty. Neatly arranged on stone shelves carved into the walls were various objects, coated in a fine layer of dust, but otherwise remarkably preserved. There were pottery shards with unusual geometric patterns, a small, tarnished metal box, and what looked like primitive tools made of stone and bone. Intricate carvings adorned the walls themselves, swirling, serpentine lines, stylized depictions of animals Jake didn't recognize, and repeating symbols that seemed to form a crude, forgotten script. It was clear this was no ordinary root cellar. This was something far older, a remnant of a long-lost civilization, or at least a forgotten community with unique customs. Jake, his historian's mind now fully engaged, carefully examined the carvings. His fingers traced the cool, raised edges of the symbols. He recognized elements similar to some obscure, early pictographic languages he'd studied. But these were unique, different. Max, meanwhile, was sniffing intently at a particular section of the wall, occasionally pawing at a specific stone that seemed no different from the others. "What is it, boy?" Jake murmured, directing his flashlight to where Max indicated. One symbol, a spiral with a dot at its center, appeared repeatedly, often near depictions of what looked like celestial bodies. Jake pulled out his phone, snapping pictures, his mind racing. He tried to recall texts he'd read about pre-colonial settlements, local indigenous legends, anything that might offer a clue. Max whined again, nudging a loose stone at the base of the wall. Curious, Jake knelt and gently pried at the stone Max had indicated. It came away easily, revealing a small, hollowed-out recess behind it. Inside, nestled on a bed of dried moss, lay a flat, dark stone about the size of a dinner plate. Its surface was etched with an intricate series of lines, symbols, and what looked unmistakably like a map. The central spiral symbol was prominent, marking a specific location. Radiating lines seemed to indicate paths or tunnels, and other, smaller symbols dotted the surface, perhaps landmarks or warnings. This wasn't just a collection of artifacts. This was a guide. A beacon of hope ignited in Jake's chest. This map, if he could decipher it, could lead to the heart of this mystery, to the treasure Max had sensed all along. The map depicted the very ruins they were in, but also showed a network of passages extending further, deeper, beneath the backyard and perhaps even beyond. "Well, Max," Jake said, his voice hoarse with excitement, "looks like our adventure isn't over yet." Following the crude map, Jake and Max embarked on the next leg of their thrilling pursuit. The map suggested a passage hidden behind a section of wall in the chamber they were in. Jake ran his hands along the stone, searching for a seam, a loose block, anything. Max, meanwhile, was sniffing intently at the base of the wall, then began to dig at a section of packed earth floor that abutted the stone. Sure enough, beneath a thin layer of dirt, Jake found a heavy stone slab with a recessed grip. With a great heave, he pulled it aside, revealing another dark opening. This passage was rougher, more natural-looking, as if an existing cave system had been minimally modified. The air grew colder, the silence more profound, broken only by their footsteps and Max's occasional soft pant. The ruins were a challenging maze. Paths were narrow, sometimes requiring Jake to crawl. Crumbling walls threatened to give way, and loose scree made footing treacherous. They had to navigate around deep crevices and squeeze through tight openings. It demanded courage, resilience, and above all, teamwork. Jake relied on Max's sharper senses to warn of unstable ground or low-hanging rocks, while Max trusted Jake to light the way and make decisions. At one point, a section of the tunnel floor, weakened by centuries of seepage, gave way under Jake's weight. He yelped as his leg plunged into a dark void, his flashlight clattering away into the darkness. Panic seized him for a moment, but Max was instantly there, barking, licking his face, then tugging at his sleeve, pulling him back from the precipice. Shaken, Jake retrieved a backup flashlight from his pack. He realized then that this wasn't just an exciting exploration. There were real dangers. Later, they disturbed a colony of bats, their sudden, leathery flight startling them both. Another time, a narrow passage seemed to end in a sheer drop, but Max, sniffing around, found a tiny, almost invisible side tunnel that bypassed the obstacle. These encounters symbolize the inherent risks of delving into the unknown, of unearthing secrets that had lain dormant for centuries. Through it all, their bond only strengthened. When Jake felt a pang of fear or doubt, a reassuring nudge from Max's head or a confident wag of his tail was enough to bolster his resolve. When Max hesitated before a particularly dark or narrow section, Jake's calm voice and gentle encouragement urged him forward. They were a team, relying on each other's strengths. Jake's intellect and problem-solving skills complemented Max's intuition and agility. They were two souls, one human, one canine, driven by a shared purpose, their loyalty to each other the unwavering constant in the face of adversity. The map indicated they were close. The passages here were more deliberately constructed, the stonework finer. The air felt different, charged with an almost electric anticipation. According to the map, the final destination lay just beyond a large, carved stone door. They found it at the end of a long, straight corridor, an imposing stone slab, intricately carved with the same spiral symbol that had been their guiding motif. There was no obvious handle or mechanism. Jake pushed, pulled, and examined every inch. Max, meanwhile, was sniffing around the base of the door, pawing at a slightly raised section of the floor. Jake knelt beside him. It was a pressure plate. Stepping on it, he heard a faint click from within the wall, and then, with a low groan of stone grinding against stone, the massive door slowly slid inward, revealing a chamber beyond. Jake and Max, following the map's guidance to this final point, had reached the heart of the ruins. He shone his flashlight into the chamber. It was larger than any they had yet encountered, and the air within shimmered, as if holding its breath. In the center of the room, on a raised stone dais, lay the treasure. It wasn't a chest overflowing with gold and jewels, as romantic fancy might have dictated. It was something far more profound. Illuminated by Jake's flashlight beam, an array of objects lay carefully arranged. There were several beautifully preserved ceremonial masks, crafted from wood, shell, and what looked like beaten copper, their expressions serene and enigmatic. Alongside them were finely wrought tools of obsidian and flint, polished smooth by ancient hands. There were scrolls made of some kind underscore of treated animal hide, covered in the same pictographic script they'd seen on the walls, seemingly detailing histories, rituals, or astronomical observations. And in the very center, resting on a cushion of faded, woven fabric, was a collection of star charts carved onto thin sheets of slate, depicting constellations both familiar and subtly, anciently different. This wasn't just wealth, it was knowledge. It was a perfectly preserved snapshot of lost culture a people who had lived and thrived on this very land, perhaps millennia ago, their existence completely unknown to the modern world. The historical significance was staggering. This discovery could rewrite local, perhaps even regional, history. It was a window into a forgotten past, offering insights that scholars could only dream of. Jake sank to his knees, overwhelmed. Max came and sat beside him, resting his head on Jake's thigh, his tail giving a soft thump. It was Max's unwavering intuition, his strange fixation, that had led them here. It was their shared trust, their perseverance through uncertainty and minor perils, that had brought them to this incredible discovery. Looking at the serene, ancient artifacts, Jake felt a profound sense of connection to the people who had created them. They had hidden their most precious cultural treasures here, perhaps in a time of crisis, hoping they would one day be found, their story not entirely lost to the ages. As the first rays of dawn began to filter through a small, high opening in the chamber, a cleverly disguised ventilation shaft, Jake knew this was just the beginning. He would contact the university, the historical society. This place, these artifacts, deserved to be studied, to be understood, to share their silent stories with the world. He looked at Max, whose tail was now wagging more enthusiastically, his brown eyes bright in the dim light. "You knew, didn't you, boy?" Jake whispered, scratching him behind the ears. "You knew all along." Max just licked his hand in response. The journey had been more than just an exploration of forgotten ruins. It had been a testament to the enduring, inexplicable bond between a man and his dog, a demonstration of unwavering faith and intuition, and a powerful reminder of the extraordinary rewards that can come from daring to explore the unknown, guided by loyalty, curiosity, and the quiet whispers of the past. The treasure was not just the artifacts, but the journey itself, and the strengthened connection forged in the heart of the earth.